These are difficult and stressful times for everybody. They are even harder for those whose homes were not always safe before all this started. With us now for more on that angle of this story. In Thunder Bay, Ontario, Katie Bortolin, Program Manager at Beendigen, Anishinabe Women's Crisis Home and Family Healing Agency. In Oshawa, Ontario, Pamela Cross, Legal Director at Luke's Place Support and Resource Centre in Durham Region. And in Toronto, Silvia Samsa, Executive Director of Women's Habitat, that's an emergency shelter and outreach centre. And we're grateful to all of you for sparing some time for us on TVO tonight to talk about a part of this COVID-19 story and some of the consequences that maybe we don't necessarily hear enough about. So I'm glad you're here to help us out with this. Katie, maybe I could get you to start here. When did you first realize that this pandemic might lead to a spike in domestic violence?
We started seeing an influx of calls probably about a month ago, and the conversations that we were having on the phone spoke a lot about the fear and the panic that a lot of families were having. We were hearing a lot of stories about isolation and the further power and control tactics that abusers were using to make the families more afraid. We were hearing about abusers who were withholding health cards or withholding access to the radio and to the news, withholding access to their children, withholding soaps and sanitizers, and all of the things that keep families safe. So we've seen it, and the influx has just continued.
Pamela, I wonder whether once you heard the order from our political leaders that they essentially wanted us all to shelter at home, did you anticipate that there would be a spike in problems?
Certainly we did, because we know that while domestic violence isn't caused by stress or financial hardship, certainly those factors contribute to the extent, to the seriousness of the abuse. We also knew that if women were going to be, as they have been, required to stay at home, initially this was because children weren't going to school anymore. And then as public spaces started to close down, that those women really, even if they weren't at the point of being ready to move into a shelter, were going to have fewer and fewer opportunities to spend even a couple of hours a day out of the company of their abuser. And we knew that that too would contribute to a spike.
Sylvia, how about you? Have you seen a spike in calls?
Yes, we have, and our shelter at this point is totally full. We have 10 women and 18 children with us, and what we're seeing is that there's been a spike provincially by 25%, and unfortunately there's no place to go. So I think we're definitely seeing the fact that also women can't phone anymore from home in their privacy. Maybe the partner might have gone to work, so they're at home with the abusive partner, they're home with the children, and really have not even a safe place to be able to call to seek help.
In which case, what do they do?
So what a lot of our work, our crisis line is open 24/7. We have an outreach program also where staff are doing a lot of safety planning over the phone, telling women if things get, if your life is in danger, you need to call 911, but trying really hard to work with them in terms of safety planning, in terms of how to ensure that they can keep safe. What we're also finding is a lot of women are calling because of sort of more prolonged phone calls just about how to keep this going, and really feeling very, as everyone else said on the call, that the home has not been a safe place for them. So trying to figure out how do they keep safe. So it's a devastating situation for our staff, for the women who call, in terms of trying to figure out what to do next.
Katie, we obviously don't want to invade anybody's privacy here, but if you could give our viewers just some idea of the nature of the calls that you're getting. When people do call, what do they say?
They want to come. They want a safe space to go. For us, we have a 24-bed shelter. We are utilizing a lot of motels with kitchenettes to encourage distancing. But a lot of the times what we're doing is like was already mentioned, is we're furthering the safety planning. We are committed to making sure that the risk assessment tools that we're using are really powerful and really capturing what's happening in the home at the time, and trying to really elaborate the different practices that they could utilize to keep themselves safe in the home, because a lot of that is looking at staying safe and not going into the bathroom or not going into the kitchen and not going into places where there's more weapons when an assault could happen.
And Pamela, how about you? Can you give us a sense of what you're hearing on the phones?
The work that we do at Luke's Place is a little bit different than the work that my colleagues have mentioned. We're not a shelter. We provide support to women who are making their way through the family court process, often after they've left the home. So what we've seen is a spike in calls from women who are having very different legal challenges than they have had in the past. For instance, part of the government's response to trying to isolate the virus, trying to slow down its spread, and these are good moves to make, are to do things like make it easier for people who've been charged criminally to be released on bail, and to release some people earlier from a jail or prison sentence that they may have been serving. So this has an impact on the women we serve when the partner has been arrested and charged with an incident related to abuse in the home. He may be getting out on bail in a situation where in the past he wasn't. He's now coming back into the family home because nobody's got anywhere else to go. What we're also seeing are the ways, and none of this comes as a surprise to us, I'm sorry to say, but we're seeing an increase in calls from women whose partners are intentionally using the crisis as a way to manipulate their access with the children. For instance, we had a call in the very first week from a woman who reported to us that for a number of years now, she and her ex have been exchanging the children at the local police station because that was the way for her to feel safe to do that. And he just unilaterally said, nope, not going to do that anymore. If you want the kids, he had the children. If you want the children back, you have to come to my apartment to get them. So those new issues, coupled with the fact that family courts have now suspended regular operation and are only hearing matters on an urgent basis, that the legal advice that used to be available through duty counsel at family court is not available there at the present time, have contributed not just to an increase in the needs of women at this stage in their departure from an abusive relationship, but also to a significant change in what their needs are.
Can I just do a quick follow-up on that? In the example you just gave, what recourse does the woman have whose ex-husband doesn't want to meet at the police station anymore, but insists that she come to his home to pick up the kids?
In the moment, certainly, we would be doing safety planning with her to encourage her not to put herself in a situation like that that would be unsafe, even if it means delaying the return of the children by some hours or days. However, in terms of what she can do legally, we have been very, very encouraged by how responsive the judiciary have been to understanding that domestic violence is by definition an urgent situation. And so we would be supporting that woman to then bring an urgent motion in the family court in her community so that she can have a judge issue an order, and they're doing these by telephone sometimes, by Zoom conference sometimes. You know, the courts are finally going to be pushed into a modernization that should have happened long ago. So hopefully within a day, she would have an order that's enforceable immediately to have the children returned to her. It would be my hope that in that situation, the judge might also set further limits on future access because of the way the abuser behaved at the beginning of the process.
Okay. Katie, let me pursue this angle with you. Our other two guests obviously are in Southern Ontario and represent much more densely populated parts of the province. You're in Thunder Bay, which is, fairly sparsely populated to begin with, but I presume you also serve surrounding communities where, the only way to get there is to fly in. Is that right? Do you serve them as well?
Yes, we have a catchment area that includes a lot of northwestern Ontario. And a struggle that we have right now is safety planning with families who are in remote communities. It's always been a challenge to work with families who are in smaller communities because, your sister could be working at the nursing station or somebody knows somebody. So often there's privacy issues that people have when they're disclosing what's happening in the home. So a lot of it is creativity. A lot of it is having those connections with other workers and other agencies and making sure that we are expressing the best we can to make sure that these families are safe. A lot of it too is exploring the motives of the abusers. There's some motives that we look at that really kind of help us navigate the safety plans that we're going to be using, whether the abusers are sadistic based or entitlement based or survival based. It really kind of depends on how we respond in terms of location with the abuse or with the caller.
And if you have to let's say you have to respond to an emergency in a fly-in community, has the nature of doing that changed at all now that we're into a new era of COVID-19?
Oh, absolutely, because there's a lot of there's already challenges when it comes with transportation and bringing people in. So there are some communities where people are locked down, where they're not able to access the services that they would normally use. So, like I said, a lot of it comes to being creative with the community, having a lot of workers who are familiar with the communities, and making sure that the families really understand what the options are for them so they can make informed choices when they're deciding to leave.
Sylvia, we do remember, I guess it was last week, that the Premier of Ontario released a list with some 70 plus organizations, businesses, institutions in the province that were considered essential services. I presume you're on it, but I don't know for sure. So is your organization on it?
Yes, so we are on that list. We are considered essential services. We do offer a 24-hour, 7 days a week crisis line, and our staff are in 24 hours a day working with the women and children who are living with us in the shelters.
Okay. Can you tell us whether or not you are able, given the COVID crisis we're all experiencing now, are you still able to provide the same amount of services that you could before this all happened?
No, not at all. We, with the whole issue around social distancing, lots of times we have groups, we have programmings with all the women, or we have children's programming that has totally been eliminated. So one of the issues when women do come into shelter, they feel a great deal of camaraderie with others, and that's not happening at all because we cannot no longer have any groups with women. We are doing individual counseling. That still continues on, and we're very committed to that. But the group settings or the group meals together, the sharing of stories, that's no longer a possibility because of the social distancing.
Katie, I think I recall about a week and a half ago, the Prime Minister made an announcement that he was going to flow several $1,000,000 to the organizations that do what you do in order to help you do what you do, with the understanding that the numbers were likely going to spike because of the current COVID crisis. Do you know have you heard whether you've seen any of that money come through yet?
We haven't seen the money. We know that the money is coming. So it's $40 million for women's shelters and $10 million for Indigenous shelters. And we're really happy to have that money come through to be able to provide the extra supports that are needed. Because as we know, the panic is increasing. We are going to see more cases of domestic violence, more cases of gender-based violence in our community. And a lot of the women that we're servicing don't have homes that they could self-isolate in. A lot of them are shelter hopping or living with friends and family to flee their abusers. So a lot of the times that money is going to making sure that they have a safe place in a motel. So that's something that we are really, really looking at doing, to making sure that our most vulnerable populations are able to have a safe place to fall.
Pamela, how about you? Have you seen any of that money flow through yet?
None of that money is designated for our organization because we're not providing shelter services. And that's unfortunate because we are seeing an increase in demand, and we've also expanded our services to respond to what's happening across the province. A number of years ago, we established what we call a virtual legal clinic. And at the time, the target of that clinic was women in remote parts of the province where perhaps there wasn't a lawyer in their community. And we were able, using technology, to hook them up with a lawyer elsewhere in the province who provided services pro bono. And we've now opened that virtual legal clinic to women anywhere in Ontario because we know that it's much more difficult to access legal advice and legal support right now. So we're much busier with this expansion of this program, which we've just done because we know it's needed. We don't have any money to help us keep it going. But we fortunately have had a fantastic response from the bar in Ontario, the lawyers of Ontario, who are lining up to provide pro bono services. And we're going to continue to offer this for as long as we possibly can. And we really do want to encourage women anywhere in Ontario who are in or leaving an abusive situation, who have a family law issue, to connect with us, and we will do our best to connect them with a lawyer somewhere else in the province who can give them legal advice at no cost to them.
But just to be clear, while the announcement the Prime Minister made does not include you, are you holding out hope that, who knows, maybe somebody will see this and maybe they'll reevaluate that?
We always hold out hope, or we wouldn't go to work, even when there isn't a crisis like the one happening now.
Understood. Okay. Is that, I guess I should ask one last question on that. That was the Prime Minister who made that announcement. Do you know whether the Ontario government has any plans to do anything to beef up its resources to you?
If you're asking me that question specifically, we have had no indication of that. I believe, and probably Sylvia and Katie can answer it better than I can, that there has been an indication from the province of some additional funding for shelters.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Pick up on that, please.
Yeah, so yes, we've been told that there will be some funds coming through. Some of the funds are, be directed at alternative housing options, hotels for the women in the shelter, for extra staffing, for relief costs, for supplies. So we're feeling very optimistic that the needs that we have that are being presented right now in terms of dealing with this crisis will be covered by both the provincial and federal levels of government.
I'm going to ask our director here, Tony Burke, just to give me a three-shot if he can, because I want to ask all three of you this question. Thank you, Tony, right away. Does any of you know whether any of your clients have contracted the COVID-19 virus?
We at this point have not. Oh, sorry. Go, Pam.
No, that's fine. So, Sylvia, you're a no. Pamela?
We're a no.
Not that we know of, but because we're not housing women, we could definitely be serving women virtually who have contracted the virus.
I understand. Okay. And Katie, how about you?
Not to my knowledge. We do screening assessments with people when they are accessing services, and we are utilizing the hospital if people have the symptoms, but we haven't had any cases come back to us as positive.
Because I'm wondering, and Katie, I'll follow up with you on this. I'm wondering whether you've had the conversation with your staff as to what you do if and when somebody comes in, and it probably is inevitable that somebody's going to come in with the symptoms at some point. If this thing's going to go on for a few more months, which it probably will, what happens when that happens?
Well, we have put out some pretty strict protocols in regards to keeping our employees and the residents safe. Our crisis home right now is under strict isolation, so the residents who are staying there have agreed to stay on property for 14 days, and it will be reevaluated as the 14 days are over. And if someone is coming in and they are deemed high risk through our risk assessment tools, our first option is to offer them services remotely through a motel and set them up with our outreach team. And then after that, if someone does want to come in and the motel is not an option for their safety, we have a wing of our shelter that is our kind of quarantined space. So if someone does come in, we have staff who are prepared to help these women during that 14-day quarantine in the shelter.
And do those staff have personal protective equipment or gloves or that kind of thing yet?
We do have them. There are more coming in, but currently our staff are wearing masks and gloves and face shields, and we are promoting social distancing by having one staff in the office at a time. Our crisis home is taped up. Our dining room is set up, so there's 6 feet away from each table. We have 2 different times for meals, so people are eating separately, which is really unfortunate because, as Sylvia earlier mentioned, these conversations that are happening in the dining room and in the living room with these families, just living together is really a healing thing for them. So we're doing our best to make sure that staff are available for those informal counseling moments, but we're recognizing that it is a challenge to make sure that that space is between all the residents and the workers.
Yeah, Sylvia, I can imagine this is a situation where your people want to obviously be helpful to the clients who come through the door, but they also want to be safe and protected. Have you had that conversation with your staff?
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're, again, it's a 6 feet, which is very odd for the type of work that we're doing, where it's much more, a setting that's where we're sitting down with people, we're very close to them, so we can't do that anymore. And that's been, I think, it's very difficult for the staff and very difficult for the women and very difficult for the children who are used to having programming every day that's been delivered by our children's counselors. So this is a totally different way of working, and it's not conducive to the way how we usually run our business.
I can imagine. I can imagine that part of the job of the staff of yours, Sylvia, is at some point just to give the woman a hug or give the kids a hug or something like that. And I guess all that's off the table now. Is that what you're saying?
It's totally off the table. Absolutely. That's totally off the table. And you're absolutely right. When we have most of our children are under the age of 9, and not to give them a hug or to give them a little pat, we can't do that anymore. So It's a very, as I said, it's a very weird way, or very not the way that we work in our sector. We're a very giving, caring sector, and we still are doing that, but we can't be physically close to anybody.
In which case, Pamela, let me get you on this. How has Luke's Place adapted now to the new reality of the road?
All of our services are being delivered virtually. If women are still living with the abuser, of course, we have to determine before the appointment begins whether the abuser is present, whether it's a safe time to have that conversation. And our team, and I think this is, I'm sure, true in the shelters as well. I just want to make a point about what this is like for the staff. Our staff, who would normally pop into one another's offices after having a difficult appointment with a client, are now doing that also electronically. But the physical contact matters, and the absence of it matters. I don't do frontline work. I'm the legal director, so I'm sort of a step removed from the women themselves, but I'm used to being able to hug a colleague when either she or I has just dealt with a difficult situation. And I think all of the frontline folks are really feeling this, because, as Silvia has said, the people who do this work, we're doing it because we care. And part of that caring involves being able to be physically connected to one another. So we're learning, and I think what we learn will be useful to us in the future. But I want to stress that this isn't just hard on the clients. It's really difficult on the staff, who are feeling very isolated as well.
Yeah, Katie, maybe follow up on that if you would. I can think of a lot of professions around the province where, proximity and tactility are important parts of the job, none more than yours. How do your people do what they do without being able to do it the way they've always done it?
Well, and that's the challenge. That's sort of where we're scrambling right now to make sure that a lot of our clients are transient people, and they know that we have spaces where they could drop in. We have cultural groups that they're welcome to attend every week, and other services that are just available to them, so that if they're on the street and they're hungry, they have a place to go. And right now, that's not an option. So a lot of the struggles that we're dealing with right now are reaching to those people who are really oppressed right now during this, and people who are really, really vulnerable when they don't have those safe spaces to go anymore.
Sylvia,
Can I just add
yes,
one
please,
comment to
please.
that? We support family court support workers who are located all across the province and who, of course, are very isolated now as well. And so on Wednesday, we're hosting a 1-hour on Zoom session. Just come to the meeting virtually, bring your lunch, whatever, and let's just talk. Let's talk. We want to hear how you're doing. We want to offer support. We want to hear any tips that you've got for how you're managing the work. And we're hoping that, sure, it's not the same as sitting around and being able to give somebody a hug, but we're really hoping that by doing this, and perhaps doing it again, depending on how long we're functioning like this, it will help people feel less isolated and less disconnected.
Just give us the 411 on that, Pamela. How do they dial into that?
Well, they will get that information from us. That's just for people who are part of this family court support worker program. Obviously, we can't have everybody in the province who's feeling isolated. I am happy to give you the 411 though for our virtual legal clinic, and the dial-in number for that is area code 905-728-0978 extension 221.
Good. Sylvia, I got about 30 seconds left here. Let me give it to you. Is there, a lot of us are looking for a silver lining in all of this, and there have been a lot of good news stories that have come from this, and the way people are chipping in and helping each other. Have you seen a silver lining in your life yet as it relates to the work that you're doing now?
I think there's been a couple of silver linings. One is the support from our donors and our supporters has been amazing when we put a call out to especially connect and support the women in our community who are really feeling quite isolated and quite vulnerable in our outreach program. I think the other silver lining, which is a bit of an interesting one, is the fact that we're really seeing the fact that we've not had an effective housing strategy for vulnerable people. And hopefully what this will come out is the fact that we need to have safe housing for everyone who needs it. And if we had a housing strategy nationally, provincially, municipally, I think we could have, a lot of women, we would have been able to go into their homes. And the fact that women are waiting in shelters for a long time to get into their homes has really been highlighted by this crisis.
Silvia Samsa, Pamela Cross, Katie Bortolin, it's really good of all of you to join us on TVO tonight. Good luck going forward with all of your efforts. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
much.
Steve. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.